This film is part of the AHDB Dairy Dry Cow Management Series, and we're going to look at how to decide the best treatment options for cows at dry-off. The dry cow period is an important part of the dairy cow's life to help her udder recover from the previous lactation and gear up for the next one. Management of the cow during the dry period is an essential part of animal care and quality milk production. Having good records of clinical mastitis and somatic cell counts is the cornerstone of selective dry cow therapy. Here is Richard Wells to discuss what is meant by selective dry cow therapy and how they select the appropriate treatments for each cow.
We're here at WC Hills at Coldnewton, Leicestershire. We're all year round calving, 750 cows. Dry cow management is a vital part of our herd health plan. We discuss it yearly with our vet to decide which products we're going to use on our dry cows. Each cow is looked at in an individual basis, looking at their milk history, using the last 3 months of milk recordings. For me, selective dry cow therapy means that every cow gets a sealant, and only cows which need antibiotics receive antibiotics.
There's a lot of research evidence now that shows the impact that internal teat sealants have on reducing mastitis infections, both during the dry period and into the next lactation. In fact, there's 18 research papers worldwide that have these key messages around the role of internal teat sealants during the dry period. There are a number of key factors that we need to review for each cow on an individual basis at drying off, essentially around whether or not she's had clinical mastitis in the last 3 months prior to drying off, and also her individual cow somatic cell count records, and in particular whether or not she's been a high somatic cell count cow at any one of the last 3 consecutive milk recordings prior to drying off. So here at this farm, Richard, the herd manager, has got cows to dry off today. First thing we're going to do is go through and review each cow and to see what we need to do in terms of administering sealant alone or sealant and antibiotic dry cow. First of all, we need to consider the cows due to be dried off in terms of where they are in their stage of lactation. If she's around 40 to 60 days prior to her due date, clearly we need to be thinking about drying her off. Any cows that are giving less than 5 litres a day also really need to think about drying these off now. So the next step is to think about clinical mastitis history in these cows and ask the question, have any of these cows that we're going to dry off this morning had clinical mastitis in the last 3 months? Because that'll be important later when we consider if these cows have cured or not, and also whether we give them antibiotic dry cow therapy or not. The next step then is to look at their somatic cell count history, their individual cow somatic cell counts, and start to ask the question, have any of these cows had a high somatic cell count at least one of the last 3 recordings? Now, high somatic cell count clearly now involves a threshold, so we're going to want to draw a line at some point above which we're going to want to give antibiotic dry cow therapy in combination with the internal teat sealant, below which we're going to administer an internal teat sealant alone. Now, having looked at the records for this farm, this is a very low cell count herd, so herd somatic cell count under excellent control. Only 12% of the cows above 200,000 currently. Clearly a threshold that's very low would be inappropriate in this herd. No need to drop the threshold. We will keep the threshold at 200,000. We're not interested in finding lots of cows to cure because this is a low cell count herd. If your herd somatic cell count is above 200,000 cells per mil, for example, and you've got 20% or more of cows above 200,000 at any one time, you might want to have the conversation with your own veterinary surgeon about perhaps dropping the threshold at which you administer antibiotic dry cow therapy. First of all, I've got a cow here that we would classify as infected. So if I look at her history, her last 3 somatic cell counts, 300,000, 230,000, 340,000. Clearly, this cow, all 3 of her last somatic cell counts above 200,000 cells per mil. She's had clinical mastitis. Simply put, here we have an infected cow, and she requires antibiotic dry cow therapy in combination with internal teat sealant. I've got another cow on the list here, which is exactly the opposite. So I've got a cow here, her last 3 somatic cell counts, 17,000, 15,000 and 21,000 cells per mil. This cow would be classified as uninfected, no clinical mastitis in the last 3 months, 3 somatic cell counts below 200,000. We would classify this cow as uninfected and therefore suitable for internal teat sealant alone. And finally, an interesting cow here, perhaps a bit more uncertain. Her last 3 somatic cell counts, 46, 181, 122, bit higher. Clinical mastitis, yes, she has had a case of clinical mastitis. This is actually 6 months ago. Since that clinical mastitis event, she's had 3 low somatic cell counts. So we're actually saying that this cow is very likely to be recovered. She's had mastitis, but quite a long time ago now. She's had 3 somatic cell counts below 200,000 cells per mil. Given this herd's excellent control of cell count, I'd be quite happy to have this cow receiving internal teat sealant alone, and actually this cow to be considered as recovered and therefore likely to be uninfected and not requiring antibiotic.
With selective dry cow therapy, we only use antibiotics in cows which need treatment. All cows should get internal teat sealant. Decision process requires up-to-date record keeping. Ideally, information on both cow somatic cell count and clinical mastitis history is needed. Dry cow management should not be considered in isolation, but as part of the overall plan to control mastitis in your herd. A structured approach, such as the AHDB Dairy Mastitis Control Plan, is strongly recommended. Working with a dairy mastitis control plan deliverer and using farm-specific information, such as milk records, clinical records and on-farm questionnaires to identify the main factors contributing to mastitis, on-farm dry cow management can be tailored as part of the farm-specific set of practical recommendations. For more information and to find a plan deliverer, visit mastitiscontrolplan.co.uk or dairy.ahdb.org.uk/mastitis. We hope you found this video useful. More information about dry cow management and selective dry cow therapy is available on the AHDB Dairy website.